Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. People in India are today divided into two aspects. And that's primarily because some people feel that the new legislation being enacted by the government of India is likely to be divisive. Others don't think so. But my concern is that why do some other busybodies interfere in the internal affairs of other countries? I received a report that the US House of Representatives is thinking of bringing a resolution condemning India for moving and passing this bill, the new amendment bill. What concern they have? Then the so-called US Commission on Religion says that Amit Shah should be sanctioned. He is being divisive. He is dividing people. Who is not divisive? Is Nancy Pelosi not divisive when she is launching the impeachment proceedings against the president for no cause at all? But I don't want to say anything. Let me concentrate on the Citizen Amendment Bill. The opposition bounden duty is to oppose, but is the opposition valid? Is it pertinent? Is it useful? Useful to the country, I mean. And I was amazed that a lot of legal fraternity and a number of so-called secular intellectuals are also opposing the bill. And sometimes I wonder, what's the problem with them? The amendment seeks to fast-track citizenship to persecuted minorities from three countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, who are living as illegal minorities in India. And the purpose is to give them the citizenship. And this would not be given to the Muslims because, according to the government, Muslims are not persecuted. They are the award declared Muslim countries. So the minorities which are suffering would be given the citizenship. And this is what the Congress and the other oppositions are objecting, that this bill would convert India into a Hindu Pakistan. Now let's take up the various aspects. First, there's another neighbor, Sri Lanka, from where a lot of refugees have come, and they are Hindus, Tamilians. They are not being given the citizenship because Tamilians were not deemed to be persecuted. There was a civil war, all right, but there was no clear persecution. There was killing, yes, but it was an intestine killing. Both parties were Buddhists and Hindus, so the same culture. So you cannot say that the Muslims are being discriminated against. As a matter of fact, if you look at the bill clearly, you would find that the Muslims, if they feel that they are persecuted, have a right to seek asylum. Now, right to seek asylum does not mean that they become citizens. So they remain in the country as refugees, as asylum seekers, but they are not citizens. This bill says very clearly that those people who are discriminated against on the basis of religion would become citizens. So the discrimination is against the minorities. It can never be against the major community itself. I do not deny there can be discrimination on other bases, but then that's not a part of it. That the so-called legal luminaries have been saying that it violates Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution of India. Article 14 and 15 Constitution guarantee every citizen equality before law, and it forbids a state to discriminate against the citizens on the basis of identity, that means religion. Agreed, absolutely. But the bill is regarding giving citizenship. And once the citizenship is given, then there won't be any discrimination. As long as they are refugees or illegal immigrants, they are not citizens. So how is it a discrimination against the Muslims? Then if they become the citizens and then it's said, okay, you have become citizen, but you don't have this right, you don't have this right, you don't have this right. That would be discrimination. Here is a process of selection. And in the process of selection, you always lay down certain parameters that what is valid and what is not valid. What are the essential qualifications? Even if you apply for a job, there are essential qualifications. And until you fulfill those essential qualifications, you are not given a job. So how do you claim that you can become a citizen if you cannot prove that you have really suffered? And secondly, why should India be responsible for everybody? So the first assumption, that is anti-minority, is wrong. It does appear that the Modi government is keeping the Muslims out of the ambit. But the very fact that in a Muslim country, logically, a Muslim cannot be persecuted, a non-Muslim can be. And then look at the statistics, look at the history, and the systematic ruling, cutting out the Muslim minorities in the Islamic countries. Look at the percentage. When Pakistan became independent, the percentage of the Hindus was 23%. Today, it's not even 10%. So, who is persecuted? On the other side, the percentage of the Muslims in India when India became independent and a partition took place was 9%. Today is almost 16%. And then you are, as a matter of fact, the center is overlooking the horrific and systematic culling of the Muslim minorities. Yes, they are Muslims, and if they discriminate against their citizens, then there are other fora open for that. India is not a dumping ground for everybody, but those people who have nowhere else to go would be accorded a place. It is a generosity. It's an act of kindness. It is not something which must have been done. India could have continued on the same way. Well, these are illegal, they'll continue to be illegal. But they said no, the really persecuted people should have some solace. Now, secondly, when we forget that the bill overlooks Muslims from Pakistan, as I said, Afghanistan, Tamils in Sri Lanka, and then Rohingyas, the Hindu Rohingyas from Myanmar would also not be given the right to citizenship. So is this not a discrimination against the Hindus then? They can say, well, if Hindus from Pakistan and Bangladesh can get citizenship, why not Hindus from Sri Lanka and Myanmar? Simply because they are not the persecuted people there. So this undercuts that argument that even some Muslims are persecuted in Pakistan, and yes, they are persecuted, but they continue to be Muslims. No Ahmadiyya has ever said that he is not a Muslim, isn't it? So because they're not persecuted as Muslims, they are persecuted as a sect of Islam. They are not persecuted as being non-Islamic, non-Muslim. So the bill is giving credentials of citizenship to the persecuted minorities. And in Myanmar, Hindus cannot be persecuted because of religion. They might be persecuted because of other reasons. Same in Sri Lanka. So this suggests that Citizen Amendment Act is about securing human rights and not persecuting or prosecuting a religion. So the concept of the US Department of the US is the Director General of Religious Freedom. It's absolutely idiotic, stupid, and unacceptable. Because this is clear that even the Hindus from the non-Muslim countries are banned from being the citizens. They are not being given the same rights. Now, this precedent is not new. The Congress, which is crying a lot about discrimination against Islam, well, let me remind them that in the times of Mrs. Gandhi regime, we had, I still remember the note that was put up, that full citizenship right be given to Pakistan Hindu refugees, but positively they'll be discriminated in favor of refugees from Bangladesh and also those cast out by Idi Amin in Uganda in 1972. In 71, 72, 73 were the horrible days. We had refugees from Uganda, we had refugees from Bangladesh, and we had refugees from Pakistan. So even the Hindus were not given citizenship. But the Muslims were not given citizenship. And then we changed. Mrs. Gandhi agreed that Hindu refugees would not be denied full citizenship. They would be given the citizenship, but Muslims would not be. So the argument that the bill makes a mockery of Article 14 is not conclusive. Do you know a Supreme Court judgment I'll refer to? The doctrine of reasonable classification. And this judgment of the Supreme Court, hey, legal luminaries, you consider yourself to be the lawyers and the jurists. Think of the Supreme Court judgment which has not been appealed against, and it was accepted by all, even these people who are protesting against it, especially I'm referring to just former Justice Markandeya Karchu. Now, the doctrine of reasonable classification says that the government is allowed and permitted to treat different persons differently if the circumstances justify the discrimination and the discriminatory treatment. Imagine if the Supreme Court itself admits that the discrimination is permissible, provided the circumstances justified, and here the circumstances do justify it. Additionally, in the same judgment, Supreme Court had interpreted the law to state that the identical treatment of individuals in unequal circumstances amounts to inequality. So if you treat persecuted Hindus and Sikhs and Jains and the Christians from Pakistan and the Muslims from Pakistan at the same level, then you are in fact discriminating against the Hindus, Christians, Jains, and Sikhs. And I'm not saying it. It's a Supreme Court judgment on this level, which was accepted by Congress and all the opposition leaders, and even the US Religious Freedom Department had accepted it. Affirmative action, which was initiated in the times of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King, is always for the deprived sections of society. And when, for example, if you have the reservation, is it not discrimination against the people who don't avail of the reservation, but you don't have to object to it? You don't call it discrimination, it's affirmative action. Here also, it's an affirmative action being taken to protect the already persecuted and prosecuted minorities from 3 countries. So the whole talk is stupid. The principle of the reasonable classification has been adopted in the Indian Citizenship Amendment Bill. I'm amazed that Prime Minister or Amit Shah have not referred to this. They should, and the Foreign Affairs Ministry has not referred to it in their rejoinder to the US Religion Commission. They should have told it that identical treatment of individuals in unequal circumstances is essentially inequality and discriminatory. And this principle is central to formulation of all social legislation in India that positively discriminates against various classes of people. And if the government has passed this test of reasonable classification, then why are the opposition and outsiders worried about? The whole noise, the cacophony of noise, is just to get attention of the future voters and to win and ensure that the Muslims become their vote banks. It's incumbent on the Muslims not to be carried away by the protestations of the opposition. I'm nothing against the opposition. India needs an opposition, but India needs a responsible opposition which does not act against the national interest. As a matter of fact, by harping on the law being anti-Muslim, the opposition is in fact creating a block of the people who think that Muslims should really be discriminated against. And that is the tragedy. Muslims are being discriminated against because of the loud protests which are uncalled for, which are unjustified, which are illogical by the opposition and by their mentors in Wahhabis and Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Pakistan, or those self-serving, self-appointed, self-anointed custodians of freedom who don't know shit about the reality of the situation, but consider their inherent God-appointed duty to interfere where it's not required. In fact, these foreigners who interfere would get a bloody nose, which they deserve. And you know, they got it in Middle East earlier, they got it in Vietnam, they got it in Korea, they might want it again. So the best thing is tell these people, keep shut. And if they're talking of sanctions against Amit Shah, let them be reminded that they had visa restriction against Modi, that they had sanctions against the whole of India. And then they have themselves removed all those sanctions. Nobody requested them to remove them. It was in their interest to remove it. And if they can be stupid enough, let them be stupid. But the law being framed is absolutely right, in consonance with the Constitution, in consonance and in adherence to the Supreme Court's judgment of identical treatment and reasonable classification. Think for yourself and don't be misled by the interested parties which are being at present thinking in a way which is, to me, anti-national and selfish, personal, without logic, without reason. Thank you.